to see who else comes in. And I think I mentioned in my email, but I wanted to reiterate that I will be facilitating today. We'll do some introductions in a minute so we can all meet each other. I work at Circle as well. I'm our Forest Health Program Manager, and I'm kind of supporting Anne-Marie and facilitating this quarterly meeting. So we're kind of tag teaming it, but I'll be doing most of the kind of leadership through the meeting. Anne-Marie's going to be taking notes. And yeah, as I mentioned, we'll do some introductions here, and I'll give it maybe 2 more minutes to see who else joins. All righty. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started and see who else joins us as we start moving through the agenda. Again, my name is Kat Perlman. I'm the Forest Health Program Manager at Circle, and I'll be facilitating our meeting today with help from a couple other reports from Anne-Marie and Chris Friedel, who just joined us. So I wanted to start. I'm going to read our land acknowledgement first, and then we'll do a round of introductions before we get into some kind of updates and announcements from anyone who wants to chime in and share. Okay, so our land acknowledgement, I modified this a bit. It's normally circles, but I modified it to encompass the full network. The Yuba Forest Network works through the Yuba River watershed on the ancestral and traditional homelands of the Nisenan tribe and includes shared boundaries with the Mountain Maidu, Concow, and Washoe peoples. These tribes have lived here for millennia and live here still, and we acknowledge the mourn their painful history of genocide and the devastation of lands and waters irreversibly altered. We are grateful for these opportunities to partner together with these tribes and to create a shared vision and rebalance our relationship to this place. All righty, well, let's go ahead and get started. I just introduced myself, so I'm going to pass it off to Anne-Marie, and then we'll do sort of a popcorn around the room to get to know each other.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Holt. I am the Forest Conservation Project Manager at the South Yuba River Citizens League. I work with Kat, and I usually facilitate the Yuba Forest Network meetings, but asked Kat to sub in for this one. And I'm going to popcorn to Katya.
Hi, sorry, I'm just like grabbing my charger, so my camera's still off. But my name is Katya Christian. I'm the sustainability manager at Sugar Bowl, and I do our forest management projects. I will popcorn to Alessandra.
Okay. My mouse got lost amongst all of the screens. I'm Alessandra Zambrano. I'm from Nevada County OES. I'm County Wildfire Coordinator, and I will popcorn over to Chris Friedel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Friedel, the Executive Director of the Yuba Watershed Institute. How about Beth Martinez?
Good morning, all. My name is Beth Martinez. Effective this week, I am the acting forest supervisor here on the Tahoe National Forest. My home unit is 120 miles to the south, the Stanislaus. With that, I'm going to take the easy path and popcorn to Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Halm. I work for Beth. I am also in a short-term assignment. I'm the acting deputy forest soup on the Tahoe with the Forest Service, and I started in June, and I'll be here until October. And my home unit is with the National Partnership Office. out of our DC office, and I'm a tribal integrator, bringing a tribal voice and perspective forward at the national office. But happy that I'm here and I'm physically in Nevada City. I will popcorn over to, did Joseph King go yet?
Thank you. My name is Joe King. I'm work with Sierra Pacific Industries as the district manager for SPI's Tahoe district here, and we manage property in Sierra, Nevada, Yuba, and Placer counties. Thanks.
All right, let's see. Next on my screen is, let's see, Carrie.
Hey everybody, I'm Carrie Rennie, and I work with the Yuba Integrated Regional Water Management Group and also with Forest Business Alliance. Sorry about that. I will popcorn over to Evan. Hi, Evan. You're muted still, though.
Yeah, Evan Smith. I'm a forester for the Natural Resources Conservation Service in Grass Valley. And I will go to Ray Dunstan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ray Dunstan. I work for the Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative as their project manager and GIS associate. And we're currently developing Project Tracker, which I'll probably speak on for a bit. And I'll do the easy way and do Amanda Malici, who also works with me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Milici, and I am the Outreach and Capacity Building Associate for the Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative. And I will popcorn to Chris Dallas.
I'm Chris Dallas. I'm the area representative for the Sierra Nevada Conservancy for Nevada County. I don't know who else is.
I think, let's see, Kenneth, I believe, and Shavati are the two remaining.
Good morning, everybody. Kenneth Remmert, work for the Tahoe National Forest on Yuba, and I am the new district fuel specialist. And I will popcorn over to Shavati.
That's a lot of names and faces for me to try to remember. Hi, everyone. I'm Shavati Karki Pearl, and I'm very new. It's just my second week in Nevada County. I'll be working with the Community Development Agency and as their recreation lead, taking over from Erica Seward, who you might have worked with before. So excited to be here, just listening in. And I see that Amy Irani has joined us too, so she could introduce herself. Thank you.
Thank you, Shabati. Good morning, everyone. Amy Irani, I'm the Environmental Health Director with the County of Nevada and the same agency that Shabati is part of, Community Development Agency. And thank you for being here. I'm just garnering information. Ignore the chaos in the back. I've moved into a new office, so it looks rather chaotic. Trust me, I'm not usually that disorganized, okay? So anyway, thank you. Happy Friday, everyone. Oh, and
Great.
do you want me to
Thanks.
pass it to someone?
I think the only person left is Diego, who just joined. So Diego, if you want to go ahead and introduce, and then I think that's it.
And Hillary.
All right. Wait, I will start and I will pass it to Hillary. I'm Diego Camacho. I work with USDA and RCS in Grass Valley. Yeah, so I'm here to. Is there anything specific that you were looking in terms of information, in terms of productions, or just simple introduction?
Nope, just who you are, who you work with. Yeah,
okay,
that's all.
So USDA and RCS in Grass Valley, and I pass it to Hillary as my coworker Evan was mentioning, but I don't see the name here, but Hillary. So whoever.
Oh, she's there. Sorry, Hillary,
Okay.
I missed
Hi.
you.
No worries. I am actually out of the Yuba City office, but we cover Sutter and Yuba County with the NRCS. I'm a soil conservationist, so we wear many hats. And part of that is fuel hazard reduction, forestry work. So yeah, that's why I'm here. Nice to meet everybody.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm excited to see a lot of new people that I have not really met. So this should be a good conversation. We have a good range of attendance. So I wanted to kind of move into announcements and open the floor for any kind of announcement. It could be organizational or otherwise in the watershed from anybody. I see 2 hands. So Carrie, I saw yours first. We can go ahead and start with you.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to let folks know about a workshop that's happening on August 15th, and it's online, and it is called the Business Resources Workshop, and Forest Business Alliance is putting it on. I'll put a bunch of the details in the chat, but basically it's about funding resources beyond grants, workforce development, tax credits, and a lot of other information. We have a pretty good panel of folks coming together from Shasta College and CalBiz and other places. And there is a link to find out more about the workshop and then a link to register. So I'll put all that in the chat. And it is, again, August 15th from 10:30 to 12. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, we have a link in the chat and then we'll also include it in the notes, the meeting notes as well.
Great. Thanks so much.
Sounds excellent. And I think Alessandra, I saw you next.
All right. So we have like quite a bit going on right now. But just next week, we will be at the Nevada County Fair at the KNCO booth with several partners, kind of highlighting what's going on in the county. So if you're at the fair, come check us out and pick up some resources. This is also the last day of our first ever Youth Preparedness Week, which was designed by our youth intern in OES. And if you're interested in learning more about how we're going to be partnering to help our youth be more prepared for wildfire in the future, tune in to the Tuesday board meeting because our youth intern will be presenting on essentially what she's been working on over the summer in her position. We also have 2 RFPs, requests for proposals, flying right now that are closing on August 15th. So if you recall, part of our grant from CWDG to update our CWPP also included 2 additional phases to the project outside of the update of the physical document itself, which were the development of our land management plan and our GIS application. Those are the land management plan, RFP, and GIS application are flying right now. Like I said, they'll close on August 15th. So the land management plan is essentially designed to highlight what are best management practices for reducing wildfire risk in our county. And basically, if we're going to call out where work should be done, we should also be calling out how we want it to be done. So I imagine we'll be coming to YFN to kind of we definitely see you guys as a stakeholder so that we can learn what you guys have also been developing in your work with through Circle. And then the GIS application is flying right now, and essentially it's a multi-part GIS application that will not only serve to monitor the CWPP, but also be this like centralized data hub that will serve to bring in existing CWPP or not CWPP and like wildfire mitigation project trackers that are kind of across the state and at the local level, and then also be an interactive playground that will allow users to basically design projects off of that CWPP data. We have written into that contract requiring them to collaborate with anyone who has an existing tracker or dashboard as part of their wildfire mitigation efforts. So like CalMapper, the task force, I'll be reaching out to you, Ray, to see how we can collaborate there. And then also, I know you guys are applying for that grant for the stakeholder map. So it seems like timing is really well because we have you guys as identified as a collaborator as well. And then if you're interested, we're also happy to share the RFP.
Awesome. Exciting. Can I ask one question? So were you saying that this the GIS app is part of the land management plan, or is it's like a standalone dashboard?
So it's part of our CWPP grant that was issued from CWDG. The land management plan and the GIS application are two separate phases of that original grant application. The land management plan will be pulled into the GIS application as well. Basically, what we will be highlighting on there is where work should be done, how we should be doing it, what are other people doing in the area, and then it will serve as like a playground so that if you were someone from an individual all the way up to an agency, you could use it to actually design projects within those CWPP identified landscapes based on sort of the criteria that we're calling out in those two planning docs.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. Awesome. Great. Thanks for sharing. Well, yeah, Ray, I'll hand it over to you for your update.
Thanks. Sorry, I was writing no notes. Good to know, Alessandra. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was just gonna speak on the progress of the project tracker. So we actually have a key partner training scheduled for August 21st, 2024. Oh, I don't know why I said that, obviously, this month. And it's from 11 to 12 p.m. Amanda's going to go ahead and actually add the link into the chat right now. So that's going to basically be a partner training. I'm also inviting users right now. So if you want to gain access to the site and you want to be a project steward, please contact me because I'm currently going through a list, but I'm missing still some people that I'm turning into project stewards and sending invites out right now. And so this training is basically going to be a how-to kind of a walk through the project tracker, how to insert data, how to edit data, and things like that. Yeah, currently the EIP integration. EIP is the TRPA's Environmental Improvement Program project tracker, if anyone's heard of that, or if they put their data into that, that's actually being live integrated right now. And we're also doing a bulk import of data. So I probably spoke to a couple of you trying to get bulk data, and we're putting that into the project tracker right now, trying to bulk it up. But yeah, after the training in August 21st, we hope to go live in August 30th. So yeah, it's coming up. Any questions? Sorry.
Ray, can you just describe what a project steward is?
Yeah, so a project steward is a bit different than a normal user. So there's different roles you can be attached to. So that is, you can add project data, you can accept other people's projects. So say if you have people under you and they're putting in projects, you might have to go in and check, just like do a quick overview and accept it before I go ahead and accept it as a site admin. And another thing as a project steward is there's reports actually you can generate in the project tracker. We're still working on the templates right now for that. We have to like do these certain codes for it. But only project stewards can technically generate reports. So project steward's just a fancy name for a user in the project tracker that's not public, like someone in the public, someone more so in our realm. If that helps. Okay.
Thanks, Ray. Any other questions about the tracker or the training? I think Beth, your hand was next, but Amanda, I don't know if your update is related to that. If so, maybe I'll have you go first and then come back to Beth.
Yeah, it's just another quick TCSI update. I guess, yeah, I'll just provide that really quick. So in a few months ago in the winter, TCSI conducted a capacity assessment for the region. And I think some of you participated in that. And yeah, just wanted to share an update that we're sending it out to everyone. We compiled a report based off of the data, and we'll be sharing that next week. And so if I don't have your email, if you want to put it in the chat and I can sign you up for TCSI's quarterly newsletter, we're going to be sharing it through that, or I can send it to you directly for anyone who wants to see it. And yeah, essentially it's just an assessment of capacity needs throughout the whole TCSI region, and it provides recommendations on how TCSI at like a regional level could maybe address some of these needs. So happy to share that.
Great. Do you want us to share it with the notes for the meeting too?
Sure, that would be great. It's not going to be released until next Tuesday, so I don't know what the timeline is for the notes, but if you guys are sending them out after that, I can have it to you by then.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. Thanks.
Alrighty. And then let's see, Beth.
Thank you, Kat. So I think I failed to mention during my introduction, I'm just here on the Tahoe during an interim period, but wanted to assure folks that so Matt Jedra, who many of you have probably worked with, is headed to the Custer Gallatin in Region 1, but the outreach notice for the permanent Tahoe National Forest position Forest Supervisor position has already gone out with vacancy announcements scheduled to open mid-August and run through the end of the month. So things are already progressing in terms of working toward that permanent forest supervisor that'll come in and fill behind Matt. So just wanted to share that. If anybody knows who might be interested parties, feel free to reach out and I can provide more information, etc. But excited to see that moving so quickly. Thank you, Kat.
That is great news. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, excellent. Well, yeah, these are great updates. Does anybody have anything else before we kind of move into talking quickly about some upcoming field events? Any other updates, announcements? If something occurs to you later, we can always circle back at the end to it as well. Okay, excellent. Well, before we get into kind of our agenda items around committee overviews, I wanted to mention, and I think Anne Marie has kind of communicated this a little bit to the group, but we do have a calendar hold for October 16th for our next YFN field tour. And that is scheduled to happen at Sugar Bowl with Katya leading that outing. And I do want to kind of offer you the opportunity, Katya, if you'd like to talk a little bit about what you hope to kind of accomplish and what the vision for that field outing is. If you want. If not, we can send information later about it too. And also, I just wanted to alert the group that we're going to kind of send around a sign up sheet for that a little bit closer to the date. But I wanted to just kind of remind everybody that's coming up in a couple months. Should be a fun, fall outing to talk about some interesting stuff happening on the Sugar Bowl property. Yeah, Katya, did you want to add anything or you want to circle back to that later?
I'll just give a little background just for those who weren't there at the meeting where I was talking about it a little bit. I don't have a vision yet for this specific day, just to be honest, but the project that I want to show some people is it's about 200-acre project that we have on our special use permit at Sugar Bowl, which had been a project about 15 years ago that ended up getting canceled because the NEPA was too restrictive. And we've been talking with some of the foresters from the Tahoe National Forest recently who feel confident that they can revive that to be less restrictive. And so we're looking to revive that and also looking at funding options. So that would be a few years out, but we're kind of starting to revisit that. So really interested in having all of you out to give feedback on the project in general and ideas on funding.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I'm hoping to get a good group out for that. I think it'll be a good area for interesting conversation across different groups. So yeah, we'll keep in touch with the network about more information and a sign up sheet. But let us know if you have any questions about that. I know we'd also discussed a potential one wouldn't be until next year, most likely early spring maybe, but a potential field outing to Yuba Watershed Institute project on the Inman property or Inman project. But that's kind of a little bit farther out. I don't know if Chris, you have any things you want to share on that. It's not scheduled. It's just something that was discussed. So we do have a couple of field outings kind of in the pipeline over the next 6 months or so. And if anybody else has ideas around that, around where would be a good place to have a field trip, we're definitely open, either Anne Marie or myself, to suggestions to just get things on like a longer term calendar for that, because we are wanting to really incorporate quarterly-ish or so outings into the network as part of our quarterly meeting schedule. Because it's definitely a great way to get conversations moving that we wouldn't necessarily have on a Teams meeting. Anne Marie, was there anything else you want me to touch on about the field trip schedule vision?
No, we'll probably have options to carpool from the Circle office up to Sugar Bowl. So if anyone is looking to do that, we'll have that on the sign-up sheet available. And we'll also be asking people to sign waivers since it is a Circle-based tour. That will come out ideally with the next newsletter, so the September-October newsletter. Yeah,
Thanks.
and of course with Katya, this will be dependent on like any kind of snow or weather events.
Yeah, mid-October is always a toss-up, so we'll see. Fingers crossed.
For sure.
Exciting. Excellent. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, we're a little bit behind schedule, but that's okay. I think some of the committee report outs might not take the full half hour. So we are going to start. So I guess I'll give a little bit of an overview. We wanted to kind of talk about the establishment of 3 committees or subcommittees. I'm just going to call them committees at this point. For the network that we have been meeting the past couple of months, we kind of determined earlier this year that to really have a strong direction and figure out like the big picture vision and have kind of actionable steps for the network, that it made a lot of sense to create actual subcommittees or committees that network members could be involved in at their discretion. So these are open to join and of course open to not participate in as needed. The 3 committees that we come up with were a steering and outreach committee, a committee for the landscape or the stakeholder mapping tool, and then a 3rd committee around landscape prioritization. So for the extent of where Yuba Forest Network works, we want to have discussions around how we can prioritize landscapes and projects, and of course, help collaboration and help collaborative conversations through prioritizing what we want to be doing as a network. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about our steering and outreach committee and what the vision is for this group. And I also want to give a little bit more background on the network at large. And for those that have not been involved since the beginning of the network, including myself, we did have a strategy subgroup when the Yuba Forest Network was first established several years ago. And that was kind of a core group that talked about the big picture strategy for YFN and kind of keeping like the vision of what this network wants to accomplish on this landscape. That was also the group that was behind the authoring of the resilience strategy for Yuba Forests, which is still kind of the only document that we've collaboratively written and completed. And at this point, it's several years old, but at some point worth revisiting and thinking about ways that it can help us with our current projects, our current vision, and if there's a way to kind of revise it and still utilize it in some fashion, that would be a conversation that the steering committee would now kind of have amongst themselves and then share out with the network more at large. So the strategy subgroup that met very regularly several years ago had stopped meeting for a while, and then we determined that we wanted to kind of reestablish that in a different format as kind of a steering team that's also focused on outreach for the network, that's making sure we have, or at least attempting to have, communications with all the different groups and individuals and organizations and agencies across our footprint that could benefit from being involved with YFN. So I'll go ahead and kind of dive into some of the details on our steering and outreach team. We have met twice at this point. We met both in June and in July, and the vision is to kind of meet probably most likely bi-monthly as possible. So every other month, and maybe more regularly if we're in the middle of kind of an intensive project that we're doing something collaboratively together. And the intention really for that group is to kind of talk about and keep a finger on like the high level direction and the high level strategy for YFN as a whole. So we have kind of these resources, of course, our resilience strategy and our mapping tool, and these quarterly meetings and bi-monthly newsletters that are really kind of a in-depth look at all the things that are going on with forest work across the watershed. But as far as actual strategy conversations and making sure there's kind of a continuous, like regular discussion around what our goals and aims are and where we are being effective or are not being effective or could be more effective, the steering committee is kind of a place to have that conversation and to keep that conversation moving, even if there's not necessarily actionable items each meeting. It's still a place to kind of keep a paper trail and keep notes and documentation of what that vision looks like, so that it's not just in the meeting notes or kind of in some person's head. We wanted to really kind of formalize that, which brings me to some of the kind of next step intentions, short-term vision for the steering committee is to build out a little bit more formal of a governance structure for the network. So not only having really like an active roster and an active and accessible kind of member list that anyone in the network can utilize to contact others, and also something that's kind of showing who's active on each subcommittee through time, but also kind of building out a resource library. We do have that to some extent on the YFN website currently. And the newsletter sort of captures that too, but I think some discussions around if there can be another kind of format that we can make sure we have centralized hub of resources and information for the region is something else that network wants to explore. Sorry, that subcommittee wants to explore. And the steering team will also kind of be in charge of continuing to lead and facilitate and brainstorm topics for these quarterly meetings. So the intention is to continue having these quarterly meetings, either virtual. We would like to do, in-person meetings at least once a year, I think, every so often. And then also to include, as I mentioned, this sort of field trip schedule and this opportunity to allow for outings to various properties, to different projects around the area, to make that a more regular piece of what the network is doing. So the vision there is also for having the steering team to work on integrating that with the quarterly meeting schedule so that there's kind of a flow and sort of a connection between what we're talking about here in our quarterly meeting and what we're looking at on the ground. And also to, I think I already mentioned the newsletter, continue publishing that newsletter for the region and making sure that all the information is still getting out regularly to the network. Let's see, there is some discussion around, this is a little bit more internal here at Circle, but also kind of a network-wide discussion as well around how we can update our website, kind of make our website as user-friendly as possible, as usable as possible, and maybe at some point having a standalone website. So currently the YFN website is a page on the Circle's organizational website. So we'll talk about this a little bit more as we get into the mapping tool committee conversation. But the vision is to potentially have a standalone YFN website at some point that maybe includes the mapping tool as well as all the other resources that I've just talked about. And I'm glad that we have, some Forest Service and some county folks here today and other agencies, NRCS folks, because one big area of opportunity that we've talked about in our 2 steering meetings thus far is really how we can kind of support the process of agencies talking with non-public lands around project collaboration, around private lands projects being integrated or at least kind of communicating, and then also helping with any sort of opportunities around completing NEPAs across properties as well. And I think we'll talk about this as well in the Landscape Prioritization Committee conversation. So there is a lot of overlap, of course, in what these committees are working on. And I think there's also a lot of overlap in attendance, which is good in a lot of ways because there's, an understanding of what's going on within each. But that's been identified definitely in steering and likely in the other committees as well as an area that we would like to support. So it's of course the vision to have a collaborative, team that's working across the watershed on these projects across boundaries. And we've been building these resources and having regular meetings and having regular outreach so that we can do that. But I think building something a bit more tangible or actually seeing a product, a collaborative product that we could apply for funding for together across properties is a vision that I think the steering team can at least help steer and guide, if not actually, complete on its own, but identify the partners that can do that most effectively. And then as far as the outreach piece for the steering and outreach committee, there was conversation in one of our recent meetings around kind of who is not in the room regularly on these meetings and who needs to be. And also there was a tribal relations conversation around how that can be moved forward, how that can be as holistic as possible, and who we'd like to really communicate with to help make that effort, complete. So there's a lot of work to do on that front. And outreach in general is, of course, an ongoing process. But one thing we just want to make sure that we're doing is this network really is intended to be for anyone that's working in forest work across this watershed and the Bear River watershed as well. So we have a fairly large footprint. It also is, nested within bigger footprints, such as TCSI's footprint. So that just merits a lot of communication and, outreach, but also just communication and touching base to make sure that we're not, wherever possible, that we're not being redundant with efforts, but just kind of supporting efforts of other groups too. All right, I think that's kind of it for the steering team. It's going to be not strictly administrative, but really pretty high level and pretty a lot of maintenance of our resources and updating of our resources as we can. In theory, it would be where a lot of conversation around fundraising would happen. But I think that could also happen, in other subcommittees or even within just the network as a whole as well. We don't have, a strict plan for fundraising for the network at the moment. We did, I think Anne Marie mentioned this at our last, actually, maybe it was in the quarterly meeting, but Circle has been fundraising to continue kind of bringing in funding to help facilitate the network. So playing the role that we've been playing for the last several years of keeping the quarterly meetings scheduled and facilitated and continuing to build the resources and share them out and to manage the mapping tool. We have applied for 3 different funding options. 2 we know we were not selected for. Well, 1 was not actually funded. 1 we were not selected for, and we're still waiting on 1. It was the National Forest Foundation Collaborative Capacity Program. So that was submitted several weeks ago now. So we're hoping to hear back from that. But the vision is to also kind of talk about how we can integrate with other partners and other collaborators in the network to help share some of the load of leading some of these quarterly meetings. And we've started those conversations, but I think the next step is to really continue that vision within the steering context, and then bring it more broadly to the network, and see how that could work out. There's a lot of ways I think that could work, and there's a lot of moving pieces, and there's a lot of relationships that we as organizations have outside of YFN. So I think one of the visions with steering is to help keep track of that, and all of that to say that Circle's intention and our actions right now are to continue at the moment, bringing in funding at a high facilitation level, to help us continue managing these quarterly meetings and finding ways that we can have others help with that work. Okay, I think that was it for the steering and outreach committee. I'd love to have any comments, feedback, or questions. We are, of course, open to having others join that committee if people feel like they have something to contribute, or even if you'd like to just join one and kind of hear what the conversation, feels like in that committee. And if you have anything to, to offer, we're open to that too. You can always reach out to me or Anne Marie if you'd like to be involved in one of these committees. But yeah, open floor if anybody has any thoughts or questions or feedback around that. And then if not, we'll probably take an early little break and then move into our report out for the mapping tool committee. And also, I guess, Anne Marie, if there's anything else you'd like to add around steering and administrative information, yeah, feel free to add anything that I missed. No comments? Okay. Great. Made sense. Excellent. So let's take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll have Anne Marie share on the mapping tool, and then we'll have Chris talk a little bit about the landscape prioritization. And yeah, and then maybe we'll end early, but we'll see you guys back in about 5 minutes at 10:43. Alrighty, welcome back, everybody. For those that have joined again, let's go ahead and move into our second half of the agenda, and we'll start off with Anne-Marie sharing about our stakeholder mapping tool committee.
All right, thank you, Kat, for the intro. So for the stakeholder mapping tool, we've met a few times since the last quarterly meeting. We had our kickoff meeting, and then we had a follow-up meeting after that. And within our committee, we have identified several areas of focus. So we want to refine a scope of work for the tool, which will be useful for both in grant applications and also as a roadmap for us moving forward. And we also need to do a data cleanup effort of the data that's currently in the mapping tool so that it does make sense and is usable and we don't have too many like repeated projects and that our projects are as up to date as they need to be to display what's actually happening on our landscape. And we also want to revisit our own taxonomy. So what fields are being used within the mapping tool? Which ones do we think are most relevant or which ones do we think are not as relevant for our work and how people use the tool moving forward? I have to say a lot of this is guided by Ray because she's been going through this as while creating the Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative project tracker. And so with that, we've been like, hey, Ray, so what have been your next steps moving forward? What are you using? What issues are you coming into? And that's been a major help for this committee. So thank you so much. Okay, so for scope of work, I would say that Circle has created a scope of work for YFN with the 3 grant applications that Kat mentioned that are specific for the tool. And this includes the creation of a dashboard, streamlining the shapefile submission process, and creating a YFN website to specifically house this tool so it's not within a subset of the Circle website. However, we still, as a committee, need to examine the scope of work and refine it based off of our discussions and needs. And we want to use this document as a roadmap to guide us in our own update process for the mapping tool so we know and can see the schedule moving ahead. As for the data cleanup effort, Ray has seen this. YFN has many different project shapefiles. Some of them are repeats, some of them are not. And this information is available online. However, we do need to clean up this data on the back end so it can be more usable moving forward. So this includes updating projects from active to completed, editing boundaries. And with that, we've hit a couple of snags with this as it relates to taxonomy, particularly some more of the like philosophical questions of like a project isn't really ever completed because you do have to go in for maintenance. So how do we display that? Do we say a project is done because the funding source for that is done, or do we say that this is in now a maintenance phase? So we're kind of struggling with those questions. So if there's any input from YFN as a whole, please let us know, and we can try to talk about this moving forward. And with that, we also need to like follow up on some of these projects that we have within our tool. I'm actually going to include a link for those who haven't seen it yet, or Project Mapper tool, so that sorry, one second. That way people can see what I am talking about within this area. Okay, so within this tool, you can see that there's several different projects. They all have different active, maintenance, or sorry, planned, active, or completed. However, like many projects have different phases for different parts of them. So some of them will be like moving forward or as like part of that process. Some of them will be in the planning process. So we also have that difference within a single project area where like they're going to have different statuses. We're also working on that as a committee to figure out what's the best way to display that information moving forward. Okay, and then also for taxonomy, we're having discussions on like what is the best taxonomy and what is the best way to display this information. For example, we've talked a lot about, you know, when projects have different treatment types and how to display that information, especially when a project has multiple treatment types and working in through that through GIS and, you know, going through the questions of like, do we create lots of different fields in our attribute table? Do we just have like one catch-all phrase to include all this information? What is the best way to display this information? So as a committee, we are also working through that process as well. So I'd say we've made a lot of really great progress in talking about this, but as you can see, we are definitely in the weeds of making sure that this tool is usable moving forward and creating an easier interface for YFN as a whole. Any questions? All right, Kat, back to you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so we'll definitely be sharing out with the network as we kind of make progress on the tool. And again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, if there are kind of big shifts, which there might be as far as working to integrate this tool with efforts such as what's happening with the county, if there's ways that we can support that GIS application that was mentioned earlier. Those are all conversations that we have on our radar, and that are definitely kind of in the context of this committee to figure out. And it is, it's a pretty, I would say, kind of a long game effort. Like, I think it's going to take a while to really make this tool maximally, valuable and usable, and to make sure it's, as streamlined as possible and integrating as best as it can with other tools and trackers that exist. So it's great we have a committee for it, because there's definitely a lot of work to do, and a lot of similar, as I said earlier, a lot of different ways that it could be to be most effective. But we want to keep it going, and we're definitely working to make sure that we can find funding to push this effort along, and to keep this committee active. And if there ever are any questions or thoughts around the tool, yeah, just reach out to Anne Marie or myself. It's a conversation that probably lots of us have thoughts about, or opinions on, or experience with. Okay, so lastly, I want to hand it over to Chris Friedel, who's going to talk about our Landscape Prioritization Committee, and give us some updates of what that group's been working on.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say it's a great turnout for today's meeting, and I just want to thank everybody, especially the agency folks, for showing up. As the Yuba Forest Network, we're only as strong as like those people who show up to the meetings, and so it's great to have so many people from Forest Service, especially here as the largest landowner in these two watersheds. So Kat talked about sort of the steering committee and these larger conversations about where we're going as a network. And I just wanted to frame it a little bit more. So far to this day, since the network was formed, from my perspective, it's functioned mostly as an information sharing forum, which has been great. Just speaking personally, some of the speakers and the conversations that have happened in YFN have directly led to partnerships and projects forming for our organization. I'm thinking specifically of the South Yuba Rim Hazardous Fuels Reduction Project, which CAL FIRE came and presented to YFN and basically asked for support from the nonprofit and local government community to help make that project happen. And so based on those conversations that started in YFN, it's led to the Yuba Watershed Institute and Nevada County OES moving forward and getting grant funding for that project. So the information sharing has been really important. And the stakeholder mapping tool, I'll just say for us, we've used it, in preparing grant applications and seeing, funders want to see how does your project fit into the larger landscape. How does your single effort build on efforts that are happening at the watershed scale? And so, the information sharing, the stakeholder mapping tool have both been incredibly important for us as an organization, and I think for others. But there's also this question of like, well, what else can we do as a network? And I think one of the things that has come out of that has been this idea that we can act as a forum for looking at how now that we have some data about projects, we can look at the distribution of projects across the landscape and identify what are some potential gaps. What are some potential areas where there can be synergies between different projects that are perhaps in different stages of implementation or planning. And I think when we look across the state at similar groups that are doing work in other parts of the state, I think that that's a real function that a collaboration or a network such as this can provide, which is really taking that larger view and bringing people together to identify gaps, prioritize areas of future work, and assess potential synergies between different projects. So I'll just talk a little bit, like the subcommittee was called project prioritization, but we, in our first meeting, decided to change the name to landscape prioritization because as the Yuba Forest Network, we are not so far really actively prioritizing one project over another. So far, the projects have all been projects that are undertaken by the stakeholders in the network. And each of those stakeholders has their own kind of prioritization process. For us, we decided that what we're really doing or talking about doing is looking at the landscape as a whole and building off of existing efforts, such as the Nevada County OES's CWPP planning effort, to really zoom in on areas that are priorities for the landscape as a whole. The development of projects can come out of that, and we hope that effort will result in new projects being formed. But it's really a prioritization of issues that are going on in the landscape. So as a subcommittee, we talked about, what can we do moving forward with this effort? What can the Yuba Forest Network add to what's already happening? And so I think that we still have some work to do to move towards that. We want to keep meeting quarterly and keep kind of pushing forward this idea of identifying, like I said, identifying gaps where existing projects are not addressing some priority needs that we've identified in the landscape, and also looking for synergies between existing projects. And so we've looked at a few different ways that we can do that. I'm trying to see if there's specific things. Yeah, I think that we still need to kind of look at different tools that are out there, and what we can use. We need to look at kind of best practices that other collaborative groups and organizations are using. I'm thinking, and this can be a discussion. I'm hoping that if other people have ideas, they can chime in, because obviously the county, Nevada County OES, is doing its own modeling effort through the CWPP to try to kind of identify priorities in the landscape in terms of modeled fuel risk and I think that we as a network can kind of build off of that effort to kind of add the layer of like, well, who are the organizations that are kind of active in those areas, and what are the existing projects that are happening in those areas, and what are some of the areas where there could be some future work. And I'll just wrap up by saying that Kat and I were at and some other people in this meeting were at the SCALE meeting, which is the Sierra to Cascades All Lands Enhancement meeting last week. And this is a kind of a meetup of the collaborative groups from all around the state. A lot of them are actual formal collaboratives that have like a governance structure and decision making and maybe memorandum of understanding, and are actually actively planning projects with Forest Service and other land management agencies. I would say that we do have that in this watershed. The North Yuba Partnership is kind of the most active example of that. But I think if you look at the rest of the watershed that's not covered by the North Yuba project, there's still a lot of room for that kind of activity to happen across the rest of the Yuba watershed and the Bear River watersheds. And that's where this network can come in. But my takeaway from that meeting was that a lot of the funding agencies are really looking for cross-boundary collaboration. And there's a real desire of coming from the top in the state, and I'm guessing that this is also true from the federal government, to not just do these kind of one-off projects, NEPA analyses or CEQA analyses, but really to try to, this is something that we talk about a lot and has been kind of used a lot, but this idea of doing things at a landscape scale. In areas of the landscape, closer in towards the WUI and closer in towards the towns and the population centers, what does that look like? The land ownership is pretty fragmented in a lot of these areas. So how do we really create landscape scale projects? And it has to happen through collaboration and through multiple stakeholders coming together and identifying needs, seeing where resources are and what resources need to be obtained. And I really think that this network can play a role in that. Just as an example, if we look at the San Juan Ridge, we have folks, or let's say like the South Yuba Canyon. It's a highly critical area that's been identified through the modeling efforts that the Nevada County OES has done with the CWPP update. Complex land ownership, a lot of recreation use, a high probability of fire starts. And I feel like if we're looking at just kind of the area right around the South Yuba River Canyon, it's a ripe area for collaboration. And so, something we could do as a group would be to look at who are the entities that are actively doing forest health projects, fuel reduction projects, community, wildfire risk mitigation projects, and how can we begin to take a step towards looking at these things in an integrated way? Just on the San Juan Ridge alone, you've got, SPI, Forest Service, California State Parks, BLM and the Yuba Watershed Institute. And on the south side of the canyon, there's entities like, well, I'll just say on both sides, the Fire Safe Council has partnered with the Forest Service. American Rivers is doing a project that's kind of on the south side of the canyon. And how do we start to really talk about and look at these projects as integrated, especially moving forward? They may have all started separately, but moving forward, how can we start to kind of talk about them and plan for them in an integrated way? And I think there are certainly steps that are happening already that are moving towards this. I'm thinking about the Joint Chiefs Initiative, where NRCS and Nevada County OES and Forest Service have been working together to identify projects that have completed NEPA or are kind of shovel ready, but need to be kind of funded and packaged together with work on private lands. So that there's definitely steps towards this, but I do think that there may be a role for the Yuba Watershed Network to play in kind of bundling these projects and giving them an actual identity as landscape level projects. So I'll stop there. These are just some ideas that have bubbled up through this idea of landscape prioritization and how YFN can help with that. And I believe that there could be some discussion if other people want to chime in.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Really great overview. Appreciate it. And I have some thoughts. I'd like to keep the floor open if anyone has anything coming to mind that they'd like to chime in on or ask or share. So I'll give it a couple minutes. If not, I have a Forest Service question for the Forest Service folks in the room. Hillary, yes, I see your hand. You're on mute.
Sorry. I have a question for Evan or Diego that's but relative to this. I'm pretty new with the NRCS, but I think I heard that some landowners can apply together for forest fuel reduction. Is that true? If Diego and Evan are still out there? Because we take individual applications and they have a farm and tract number with FSA. So I can see how that would be really complicated to combine, but I thought I had heard that maybe people can apply together. But another thing is just people need to apply like yesterday if they want fuel reduction, because cultural resources can end up making it so that, you know, they're applying in November and they think they can maybe start next October, but it could be another year depending on how the application is processed with, like, because the application has for NEPA actually has to go to SHPO and the state. I think that is the state for cultural resources, but then also it has to go to another office in between. So it just takes a long time. And I guess maybe Diego and Evan stepped out.
Evan left the meeting.
Okay. And yeah, part of what NRCS can do is outreach as well. And I don't know how much you are doing for like the San Juan Ridge area, but we're able to do that like for any events. So just let us know, and we could set up a booth, and you know, that could be a way to get collaboration with landowners. I don't know how much you already know or have talked to NRCS folks at all.
Are you talking about the EQIP funding source mostly?
Yeah.
Here? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And prescribed burning is gaining momentum, and we also have, you know, biological practices that people can get funded for, like grazing, and then of course the big, machinery, or small too. People can just do chainsaw and.
What is the status of the EQIP program? Like, you were saying applications were due yesterday, or people should have.
Oh, just
it's a rolling application process, right? Do you have any idea of what the backlog is right now?
I know the Grass Valley office, like 80% of their applications are forestry fuel reduction. And I think they can process things pretty quickly. Yuba hasn't had a forester for a little while, and we've had a lot of new and turnaround. Anyway, turnaround applications, I guess. But we are getting familiar with it more. I think it could go a little faster, but pretty impacted with other practices for like Sutter County. But definitely interested to well, they were all high priority last fall. So yeah, ones that had been rolled over for like 4 years, we finally processed, because those became a higher priority, like no matter what it was, there wasn't any different scoring with fuel reduction. It was just like if you had a fuel reduction project, you got funded. Whereas some of the other practices like irrigation might be different levels that people would get points and ranked. But if you had forest application fuel hazard reduction, then we got those all funded. So yeah, that I'm thinking likely is going to be a high priority again. And it just takes a while. Like people think, oh, I'm gonna start in the spring, get my application in November, and I'm going to be able to start in the spring because they want to get started as soon as possible with the fire danger. But we have the NEPA process to go through, and that ends up taking a long time. Diego, I was just saying how I wasn't sure if we're able to combine different landowners, if for fuel hazard reduction, or if landowners wanted to come together and say they were neighbors. I know there's more points for that if they're in a Firewise community or things like that. But as far as actually having one application for like a few people, do you know if that's possible?
In terms of, I know there's a way that people, clients can go into like a partnership kind of deal of their neighbors and just apply as one block of people. The specifics of how exactly that gets done, I'm not really aware. I know in Grass Valley we do have a couple of clients that are basically we have this document basically that the client is so it's like leasing the property, some part of or their property with the um practice are gonna be done for a certain time while the practice is done basically. So basically we have one client that has um all around his property, all the neighbors has basically leased them their part of their property so he can do the work on those parcels. So that's one way they can do it. In terms of the partnership, I'm not really aware how I know it can be done. How do we do it? That's the problem. I might have to ask Evan if that's something that has been done in Nevada County. It should be pretty easy. It's just how we done. I haven't really experienced it, but I know for sure that the one that we're dealing with is more of a client that has the tools, the equipment, and whatnot, and then leasing the property or basically the getting permission um, to do the practices on other parcels and basically getting paid through us, and then he gets basically he leases the property from them, and the neighbors get their property done for free basically. He has like a business doing that kind of way. Um, so let me see what other questions you have.
I'm also wondering, like with your application processing, if someone turns in the application in November, have yours been able to start the following October? Your applications, do you know?
We have I haven't really looked at the list. We're still so that we have kind of organization issues in our office. We have to hopefully we'll get those done in October probably. But we have around 100 to 150 applications lagging behind that haven't even been. I did a couple that haven't even contacted since 2020.
We don't need to do outreach.
So it's not gonna be as easy as supplying in November and getting work on October. The way we're gonna do it, that's still on the way. How are we gonna figure that out?
You guys need to hire another person up
We
there,
are
like
we
me.
have way too many people for sure. And I would have recommend Hillary that you get in contact with Emery or Kat to get into the steering committee maybe there's another one um to get more involved in terms of what YFM can do and how we can expand into the Yuba County since we have a part of it the Yuba River watershed. Um, so yeah, Hillary, I recommend you do that so you get more in contact what next approaches it could be to include that. But we're pretty much in the same scope as we do have a forester. We have Evan in, in Grass Valley,
Yeah.
but there's still a lot of work to be done. And
Yeah, I was just saying with us, it is like we've processed them, everything has gone through except, and I thought October they'd be able to start work, but I guess now because we weren't able to get the cultural resources done until I guess the summer or a little sooner than that, that now it's probably just not even going to be until the next window, the following October, because that's the window to do the work. So yeah, I was just saying with SHPO, that can also, there's a timing, I guess, involved with that. If we had done SHPO sooner, then possibly we could have gotten October, but there was just a lot of unknowns, I think, before that anyway, and we didn't have the, I guess, trained people yet, me included.
it will take some time, and hopefully we will get more cultural resource specialists that we can get that work done faster. But that's where we're standing.
We do do NEPA though, so that's something if you guys didn't know, that can be maybe helpful for you if some neighbors, landowners have done NEPA.
Yeah, I've been thinking, and I admittedly I don't have a great understanding of the NRCS process for these projects, but I've been thinking as y'all have been talking about where the support could come from or where the integrations like Chris was talking about would be. It would be great, Hillary, if you have capacity to maybe join the next landscape prioritization call to talk a little bit more about, I'm not sure Evan's gone, Diego, if you're on that one, but having some NRCS presence on that committee, if not already, would be, I think, helpful to get into the weeds of this, because the NEPA piece, it sounds like, is where there could, ideally be some integration and planning. But with that many, I mean, with just hearing the number of like individual applications, I guess just highlights how complex this is with small and private landowners. Where the connections need to happen and where at what stage in this process is the best place for us to look at trying to increase efficiencies, I guess. So it's illuminating to hear y'all talk about it. Let's see, Chris, I know your hand has been up for a bit if you have a comment.
Yeah, it's responding to Hillary. So actually several things in terms of packaging, multiple private landowners. As far as I know, none of the state agencies can directly give a grant directly to private landowners. It has to go through a nonprofit or potentially a tribe or something like that. So Chris Riddell had mentioned, for instance, one of the projects that SNC is funding is 3 private landowners on the South Yuba, but the grantee on behalf of them was American Rivers. So, but I think the point that you guys have been discussing, which is interesting, is NEPA, because NEPA is not required for private land except you're the one federal agency. So just the same way that we have to do CEQA on federal land if we're a funder, even though federal land doesn't require it, is a hindrance. So, for most of the small projects we do, they're generally going to be an exemption, something pretty simple from a CEQA standpoint. But as soon as you get federal money in there, it's going to slow it, slow the process down. So
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know what the
it's ridiculous
workaround
there's
with
not
that. It's kind of,
an
essentially
exemption.
the lag time is so long for the NRCS, um, projects or, on private land. Because I don't know, I'm trying to, I believe that like at least one of the landowners that were, we have a grant too, had also, they participate, with that, bring in their own resources as well as ours. And I think one of them had some NRCS funding, but I'm not positive on that. That was probably something that was set up quite a long time ago. So that's the crux with us. We talk a lot about all lands, but so much of what we do is either public land or private land, but very difficult to put them together. Chris Rydell is one of the few that we've managed on the Little Deer Creek project to package a couple together. But as she knows, getting the environmental compliance and the land tenure, the permission to do land, particularly if you're dealing with a lot of small private landowners, is difficult.
Yeah, I was inspired by a presentation at scale that was Dylan Sheedy, who works for the Truckee Fire Protection District. He was talking about getting funding from the CAL FIRE's Forest Health Program, basically by going around in the Truckee watershed and, or sorry, the Truckee the Truckee community, and taking some THPs that hadn't been implemented and looking at work that the Forest Service was doing, looking at some other private landowners doing work, and he packaged them together in a way that it met the requirements of the Forest Health Grant. And there's some similarities to, in what we could potentially do here in West County. There's some real differences too in terms of the situation down here, but I do think it's a way that, particularly for that that funding source, the CAL FIRE's Forest Health Grant, it could potentially be put together in a much broader way than it has so far in this watershed. So far, I believe it's been, I know that the Fire Safe Council has gotten one to work on Forest Service land. There was another one I think that went to Forest Service project in the North Yuba, but so far, as far as I understand, it's been just single landowners, or sorry, single land managers, rather than something similar to what Dylan's done over in Truckee, which is kind of putting together multiple landowners who all have different projects, kind of packaging them in one kind of landscape level view, and really seeing the synergies between they I think before he sort of coordinated it, they were all individual projects, but it really does make sense to think of them as one project when you put them all on a map. So I was kind of thinking of something similar, not necessarily trying to put together a bunch of private landowners into one project, but to really look at, state parks, SPI, Forest Service, BLM. There could be some other private landowners in there if it makes sense, but obviously that would make it a lot more difficult.
Yeah, thanks for the input. Yeah, I saw Dylan's presentation as well. It was definitely interesting and inspiring, but also, yeah, like you said, there's some components that I'm like, I wonder if that would work where we are, but then other things that were just kind of high level takeaways that he shared about what makes that work. Like Chris and I kind of talked a bit about how having like someone or some group that's taking on like the early planning component is really, really important. You know, you have to have that initial push that requires kind of a lot of early effort without maybe not like strategic or specific funding is and I know also speaking from you know, it's very different, but speaking from my understanding of how the North Yuba partnership started, it was similar in having, you know, these intensive planning years that really looked at opportunity for quite a long time before there was anything that was really able to be applied, you know, for funding. So yeah, a lot of questions, but yeah, I was thinking this before. I feel like that this committee that's focusing on this prioritization discussion is a really valuable tool that we've, you know, instigated here with YFN. And I think it's kind of what we are talking about more broadly as a network, but trying to really hone in on, you know, hearing input from all of these different groups that are here right now and others that aren't. I know Julie Fair with American Rivers often attends. She wasn't able to today, but it'd be great to have her in the room at some point, maybe on that committee, to get some input on how that process went, what her experience was there. So it's great that we have such broad and existing broad communications across all these different groups, but still these questions that so many collaboratives across, you know, California are talking about right now. So, you know, we have the tools and we just have a process to really figure out exactly how to build it moving forward. So I appreciate everyone's input. I did kind of want to ask, and I know, you know, both, or not both, but Beth and Ashley both, who are currently on the Tahoe, but aren't, you know, haven't been on the Tahoe or in the Yuba very long. If you have any just general thoughts from, you know, Beth, maybe you do. I'm not sure how closely you've worked with the collaborative down in the Stanislaus, but what your experience has been with this private public conversation and what, you know, what the planning around that has looked like in your experience. If you have anything to share, it'd be interesting to hear.
Sure, thank you, Kat. So the collaborative effort that Kat is referring to, our collaborative group, is called the Yosemite Stanislaus Solutions. That group represents, I think now we're up to maybe 38, 39 different entities that actually came together soon after the Rim fire, which was 2013, one of the, you know, at the time, large fires in California kind of started this round of large fires. They came together in a way very interested in, you know, restoring the landscape that had burned, and have done some great work in that footprint, but a few years ago recognized the need to not just restore the landscape that had burned, but to, in fact, be proactive to keep the remainder of the forest on the Stanislaus green and proactively treat accordingly. That group has been working very well together now for many, many years. They are engaged with the forest on a continual basis in the planning. And I firmly believe that because of that collaborative and the success and the efforts that had been happening before the agency started to talk about the wildfire crisis, I think the efforts and the accomplishments of that group led to the Stanislaus watershed landscape being one of the 10 initial wildfire crisis landscapes similar to here on the Tahoe. Very familiar with, you know, again, what's going on in the Stanislaus that has continued to grow. The one thing that I think is probably key to some of the conversation and dialogue that I haven't heard mentioned here today, and again, forgive me, just getting my feet wet with all the great things going on the Yuba and who all the players are and how you're organized and doing business. But our county, Tuolumne County, holds a master stewardship agreement and has increased their capacity tremendously in support of the landscape efforts. And, you know, by having that MSA in place, they are able to, you know, we're able to funnel funds to them and use county processes for contracting and implementation that otherwise would take a lot longer to get through federal systems and processes. So that's one piece where I think without that group, we would not be where we are without that entity, the county. The second thing is that we have done some of what Chris and others have spoken about, and that is, identified as a group where we need to connect treatments across multiple ownerships. And it's kind of one process to work with SPI and other large landowners. But with regard to individual private landowners that are interspersed, throughout the county and the WUIs and bordering what the forest is doing, the county has pretty much taken the lead there to reach out to those landowners, to get them involved with fire safe councils, firewise communities, et cetera. And it's been slow to move, but as neighbors who have been willing to allow the county then to do contracted services on private lands through some of their mechanisms to connect fuel breaks and that type of thing across multiple ownerships, as landowners who initially were not, the least bit interested in coming to the table because they thought the federal government was behind all of it, and not a lot of trust there. The county has been able to work through some of their mechanisms to help us implement projects, and then other neighbors have seen what's been taking place and now are coming to us saying, okay, how do I step into the mix here, and what can I do to be part of this and have you treat across my property as well. But a whole lot of that is being done again through that MSA and through our county partners. So has it been easy? Of course not. Are we still working our way through those processes? Absolutely. We're getting a little better at it overall. We've, on the Stanislaus 2 years ago, finished the planning for the first half of the landscape through an EIS and went to implementation immediately following that. And I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I can certainly gather some numbers and either send them to Kat or Anne Marie or make them available, to the group in terms of what we've actually accomplished on the ground. And then just yesterday, the day before, we published our second our ROD for our second EIS in that landscape. So at this point in time, we've completed the planning across that entire landscape and are well underway with implementation. So a lot of good things happening. If there are specific questions, I may not be able to ask or answer them here on the tip of my tongue, but certainly can work to connect people or get additional information on where those questions might lie.
Go ahead, Chris. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks for that, Beth. I'm curious, Alessandra, if you can kind of respond with how you think the CWPP's planning effort could lead into or could inform the work of the YFN prioritization, landscape prioritization committee, as I described it, or how you see those two efforts kind of joining.
Yeah, so just for people who aren't familiar with how we stood up that process, just as a really brief overview. So we did our wildfire risk assessment in-house, and part of the reason was we knew we needed to sort of establish this prioritized wildfire hazard across our landscape through fire behavior modeling. But we also recognized that if we only looked at that lens for prioritizing landscape for risk reduction, then we were disregarding a lot of what really makes recovery from fire very difficult, which is community values. And it's not so much about your individual property being burnt down, but more about the things you value as a community that make it possible for you to be able to even consider building back. And we've seen that in communities where they've faced such devastation. It doesn't really matter if 1 or 2 or 3 properties build back. If the entire community structure has been destroyed, recovery is almost nearly impossible. So we then kind of went to the community and asked them what they actually saw as being the most important. And so we incorporate a lot of non-traditional components into our risk assessment. So of course we looked at, like critical infrastructure, critical lifelines, those things that allow community to just exist and function. But then we also asked our communities, well, like how important is it for you to see protection of our water resources, our recreation resources, even our historic districts, and just kind of like started pulling in a lot different types of resources that we thought would be valued. And basically what we ended up doing was assessed the risk of all of those resources and then layered them together so we could see where there was opportunities for multi-beneficial projects, so that if you were working in the space that was the darkest layer, it was essentially meaning that your work is not only a wildfire mitigation project, it's also a project that is protecting community lifelines, it's a project that's protecting community health, it's a project that's protecting natural resources, because really the goal was multi-beneficial. So with that, we have a project priority landscape that's basically these areas delineated in our county. Actually, let me really quickly do that one thing. Hold on. So this map behind me is actually the prioritized landscape across our county. So it's hard to see at this distance, but anywhere that's super dark is basically the highest level of priority, because it would theoretically protect the most resources that are of the most value to our community, versus the lower colors are still very important, but slightly less prioritized because they offer slightly less opportunities for multi-beneficial projects. So I think like this is where I see this sort of fitting in. This is sort of a piece of that puzzle, and this is a piece of data that can be built off of. This has obviously been created for a very specific like planning effort, but we never envisioned that it would be only us using it, which was why we included so many things that, maybe aren't relevant to a mission of life and property, but are relevant to protecting a community as a whole. So that's kind of where I sit with is because the other piece to it is, I'll slide over here, is we also layered projects on there to kind of see, like, which is this guy, where projects aren't happening. And it's really hard to see, but like there's a massive gap right here, and it's a really high priority landscape. This is the Greenhorn River drainage and the Bear River drainage. And there's nothing happening there, but it's pretty important, and it's a big hole. We have this like semicircle and then a big gap. So I think that's definitely something that can be built off of. So yeah.
I guess I'm curious if you see what you see the role of YFN being in the effort that the county's doing.
I mean, so I think really it's just, we don't claim to so the county is not an implementer, so we don't claim to own any of that land, or by saying it's a priority, we are the ones who have to be the person to design a project. Our goal was to give a landscape for entities like YFN to work off of. Like we don't have any, like if there's a gap, if for example in the Greenhorn Creek, it doesn't have to be us. We just wanted to start giving a place for people to start playing in that piece. I think there's also a lot of opportunity as we're developing the land management plan to partner with YFN on discussing like what do we really see as being acceptable treatments in our county? How do we make sure that we're not building barriers to getting work done in a way that's effective? And I know Anne Marie is part of our CWPP project team. So, I mean, yeah, I think our goal is really just to provide an opportunity for people to do work. And so I don't think there's any reason why YFN can't be involved, and they're already involved, or work off of what we've already produced.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's definitely Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Emery.
Sorry. I know this is very like in the weeds with this, but I know that Greenhorn Creek area has been identified as like a potential future project by some entities. So I think that might be something that we could maybe discuss about in the Landscape Prioritization Committee meeting, which will happen in early September. So yeah, if that is also a project that would be interesting for YFN to either connect on or identify people who might be potential partners, yeah, that would be a great conversation to continue.
If I can add to that, just again from a different perspective, and again, trying to wrap my head around where things are at here, and but in this idea of having a place for people to start, and I know Chris, you mentioned trying to kind of wrestle with who all is interested and where and what they're working on, right? And it takes a while to kind of tease that out, but if you have that overall plan of where some of those priorities are, what kind of work is needed. Now I'm going to jump way ahead in that 7-8 years ago, what was happening in Tuolumne County and on the Stanislaus is that when funding opportunities came up, different entities were competing against each other for the same funding sources to get work done. Right. So going through some of these steps and processes has really helped us. So when getting the planning done, and then again going through sort of a prioritization and seeing who's out there who really wants to take the lead on seeking funding for this particular piece of implementation, et cetera. It's really spread things out. So we're no longer competing against each other just because we're from different agencies or different interests for the same dollars out there. So eventually an outcome along those lines can be incredibly beneficial, right?
Yeah, and I'll say maybe this is self-interest on our organization's part, but I am looking forward to future CAL FIRE forest health grants and recognizing that there are multiple entities within this area that are going to be applying. And I want to potentially put together a joint application to that particular grant program because it's needed. I don't think the agency funding agencies are going to look at multiple projects coming forward separately, and they're going to say, why don't you guys talk to each other? So I just want to start that conversation. It's August, beginning of August. Last year, the notice of funding availability came out in November for that grant source. So we've got some months to kind of start thinking about what might that look like. And then there are other funding sources too. I don't want to just focus on CAL FIRE, but I just think moving forward, it would benefit us to be a little bit more coordinated.
Agree.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and there's so many considerations, because there's obviously multiple counties that are part of our YFN footprint, and even within the North Yuba project, there's multiple counties as well. So I've been thinking too about what the county piece is and how to move it forward. But I like the action step of starting with actually having like a focused objective, like you said, Chris, with like a specific grant opportunity, or figuring out what a collaborative application looks like and what the process is for that. And I know we've been talking about that a little bit before this meeting, and think it's a great conversation to keep moving forward. Probably in multiple of the committees, as well as in the quarterly meeting as things evolve. But yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces, and especially I guess from Circle's perspective or our perspective, who are not really implementers at all at this point, but are kind of managing much of the facilitation of the network at the moment, and are involved with the North Yuba Partnership, which is a big piece, not only of the landscape, but kind of a background of understanding of how a landscape scale planning effort can look. I mean, it's a different story because it's on one landowner. Well, it's not, but for the actual EIS and the work to be done, it is. So, but I'm just like, there has to be some integrations here. I've been trying to think about that for a while now. So holding both of these different but similar collaborative groups in this region, and thinking about how to push forward some action, I think is exactly what we need to be talking about. So this was a great conversation. Thanks everyone for chiming in, and I feel like we got some different perspectives, which is always a good thing. So I think we'll have some interesting notes to share and some resources to share out after this meeting. And yeah, I hope we can get some good attendance at that October field outing, because that's a kind of another, another approach to talking about work on private property, but still really valuable, I think, for us to see what's going on in the footprint. Yeah, so that's it for our agenda. Again, thanks everyone
I'll
for
just
chiming
say
in.
one more thing,
Oh,
which is that
yeah.
if anybody was inspired by our discussion of the YFN's effort in landscape prioritization, I would invite you to come to our subcommittee meetings, and maybe Anne Marie, you could put the invite out again to the wider list, because it would be good to, if we want to continue this discussion, it would be good to get yeah, just some more broad-based support on that committee.
Yes, Chris, we'll definitely include like a call out for that in the follow-up email for this meeting, as well as in the next newsletter, which will be for September, October.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. Well, anybody else have any last minute thoughts before we close out? All righty. Well, thanks again for joining. Yeah, as Anne Marie said, we'll get out all of our resources from today. I'll get out the recording even, and we'll see you guys again either at a subcommittee meeting or at our next quarterly meeting or a field outing. So, yep. Thanks a lot, and y'all have a good rest of the day.
Wait, just before we conclude, there is a link for a survey. If you could please take this survey before you leave. It's just for feedback for the meeting. So it's just a general, like, this is what the, sorry, Kat, I'm trying to find the link for it right now.
Yeah, I had it somewhere too. Sorry, I forgot about that.
I think I got it.
Okay,
So it's just here. So just fill out, it's just a general, like, how did you find this? How would you improve it? That kind of thing.
Yes. So meeting link is in.
That didn't work.
Oh, it didn't. Here. I think I have it too. We can also include it in our follow-up email too. So if you don't get it now, then we'll provide it again and hassle you again to try to fill that out. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me, Anne Marie.
No problem.
All righty. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys soon.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.